Today, Cummins Inc. is a multi-billion-dollar industrial giant, manufacturing plants across continents, operations in 190 countries, and thousands of employees powering industries around the world. But here's the question no one asks. Was Cummins always meant to be a giant? The answer is no. Because in the beginning, Cummins wasn't chasing billions, factories, or global dominance. It was driven by one simple obsession: to take diesel power to a world that had never trusted it. This is not just the story of a company. This is the story of a boy with no formal education, no wealth, no safety net, but an unstoppable belief that machines could change the future. This is the origin of Cummins.
Welcome to Industrial Chronicles.
Chapter 1. The Invention of a Visionary. The man behind Cummins was Clessie Cummins. He was born on December 27, 1888, in Columbus, Indiana, into a humble farming family. Life was hard. Money was scarce. Education was limited. Clessie never went to college. He never earned an engineering degree. In fact, he left school after the 8th standard. But what he lacked in formal education, he made up for with pure mechanical obsession. At just 11 years old, Clessie built his own steam engine. Not from textbooks, not from classrooms, but from curiosity, experimentation, and raw instinct. Even as a farm boy, machines fascinated him. Engines weren't metal parts to him. They were living systems, waiting to be perfected. By the 1910s, Clessie found work as a chauffeur and mechanic for a local banker named William G. Irwin. That job changed everything. Irwin didn't just see a mechanic. He saw a self-taught engineer with extraordinary intuition. And Clessie had a bold belief: diesel engines could outperform gasoline engines if they were built right. At the time, diesel engines were loud, unreliable, and unpopular. Most people had already written them off. But Clessie Cummins saw potential where others saw failure. The birth of Cummins, the 3rd of February, 1919. In 1919, with financial support from William G. Irwin, Clessie Cummins founded the Cummins Engine Company. The first engine wasn't glamorous. Just 6 horsepower, designed for farm use. Sales were slow. Farmers didn't trust diesel engines. Some even returned them after seasonal use. Money burned fast. Investors grew impatient. And failure was always one bad decision away. But Clessie refused to quit. Instead of advertising, he chose proof. The $1.39 gamble. A turning point in 1929, Clessie took a bold risk. He fitted one of his diesel engines into a Packard limousine with barely 3/8 inch of clearance. Then he drove it from Indianapolis to New York City. Fuel cost? Just $1.39. No breakdowns. No refueling stops. Pure endurance. Though banned from the official auto show, he parked the car across the street. And that diesel-powered Packard became the most talked-about machine in New York. That moment changed how the world saw diesel engines, from survival to industry. During the Great Depression, yachts vanished. So Clessie adapted again. He convinced Irwin to use diesel engines in delivery trucks for Purity stores in California. Those trucks climbed mountains. They lasted longer, they cost less to run. And just like that, the over-the-road diesel truck industry was born. Cummins engines soon powered trucks, buses, marine vessels, race cars, and Clessie earned 33 U.S. patents, as Willie set world records for speed and endurance. Chapter 2. Forging Power, the Early Rise of Cummins. By the early 1930s, Cummins Inc. was no longer just a daring experiment. It was still small, still fighting for survival. But something had changed. For the first time, the world was beginning to trust diesel power. The 1930s, from experiment to reputation. The 1930s were about one thing: credibility. Cummins engineers focused on precision, reliability, and endurance qualities gasoline engines of the time struggled to match. And then came a breakthrough. the 8 Series engine. Nicknamed the babe of the automotive world, the 8 Series became wildly popular in trucks and buses. It was compact, efficient, and brutally reliable. For fleet operators, this engine wasn't just machinery. It was lower fuel costs, longer life, and less downtime. By the end of the decade, Cummins had crossed a critical line. It was no longer proving diesel engines could work. It was proving they worked better. This decade transformed Cummins from a bold idea into a commercial engine manufacturer. The 1940s, war, trust, and government contracts. Then came World War II. As global conflict intensified, the U.S. government turned to American industry for dependable power. Cummins was ready. While the company did not manufacture tanks, its engines were already known for something the military desperately needed: reliability under extreme conditions. Cummins engines were installed in military transport trucks, supporting logistics, supplies, and troop movement. In 1941, the U.S. Army placed a massive order: 5,000 H-model engines for military transport vehicles. This wasn't just a sale. It was a vote of confidence. The war years hardened Cummins technically and organizationally. Engines were tested under dust, heat, overload, and non-stop operation. And Cummins passed. In 1947, Cummins reached another milestone. It was listed on the U.S. Stock Exchange. From a farm boy's workshop to a publicly traded American manufacturer. By the end of the 1940s, the company had earned government trust, built large-scale manufacturing capability, and emerged as a national industrial supplier. The 1950s, dominance on the highway. The 1950s were explosive. Post-war America was moving fast. Highways expanded. Trucking boomed. Industry scaled up. And Cummins engines were everywhere. By 1955, Cummins powered more than 50% of all diesel trucks on used highways. More than half the market. This wasn't luck. This was dominance. Fleet owners chose Cummins because the engines lasted longer, delivered higher torque, consumed less fuel, and survived punishing workloads. Cummins didn't just sell engines in this era. It defined the standard for diesel power in America. At the same time, the company began its first steps beyond U.S. borders, laying the foundation for global manufacturing and international partnerships. The early vision was expanding from national success to global ambition. The foundation is set. By the end of the 1950s, Cummins had achieved what few industrial companies ever do: profitable operations, government contracts, public market confidence, over 55% dominance of the U.S. diesel truck market, and the first roots of global expansion. The company was no longer chasing survival. It was shaping an industry. And the next chapters would take Cummins far beyond American highways, into a truly global industrial powerhouse. Chapter 3: Power Without Borders. Cummins takes on the world. By the 1960s, Cummins Inc. had already conquered American highways. But the real question now was far more dangerous. Could Cummins survive outside America? Because global expansion doesn't reward strength alone. It punishes mistakes. And it exposes weaknesses. The 1960s. Leaving home. As the 1960s began, Cummins faced a hard truth. America was no longer enough. Customers were spreading across continents. Governments demanded local manufacturing. Competitors were rising in Europe and Asia. So Cummins made a defining shift. It stopped thinking like a U.S. manufacturer and started acting like a global industrial brand. Manufacturing moved closer to customers. Alliances replaced exports. And the Cummins name began appearing far beyond American borders. This decade wasn't about dominance. It was about positioning. Cummins was planting flags quietly, preparing for battles that hadn't yet begun. The 1970s, the turbocharged gamble. The 1970s changed everything. Fuel efficiency suddenly mattered. Emissions regulations tightened. Customers demanded more power from smaller engines. Cummins had two choices: adapt or fall behind. Then came one of the most strategic moves in the company's history. In 1973, Cummins acquired Holset Engineering, a UK-based leader in turbocharging technology. This wasn't just an acquisition. It was a power multiplier. Turbochargers allowed engines to produce more power, consume less fuel, and reduce emissions. Almost overnight, Cummins engines gained a decisive edge. Holset later became the foundation of Cummins Turbo Technologies, reshaping engine performance across industries. During this decade, Cummins also pushed into construction equipment, agriculture machinery, industrial power applications. By the end of the 1970s, Cummins was no longer just selling engines. It was selling engine ecosystems. The 1980s, entering the next frontier. The 1980s were about scale and reach. Cummins expanded manufacturing across Latin America and licensed production across Asia. This strategy mattered for one reason: local engines beat imported engines. Lower costs, faster delivery, better regional customization. And then came a pivotal move. Cummins entered China, not aggressively, not recklessly, but early. This decade quietly laid foundations that competitors wouldn't fully understand until decades later. Cummins wasn't chasing short-term profit. It was securing the future. The networked era. The 1990s marked Cummins' most transformational phase. This was no longer about engines alone. It was about systems, components, and global intelligence. Cummins built a worldwide web of joint ventures, acquisitions, and technology partnerships. India, a strategic masterstroke. Cummins' relationship with India began earlier, but the 1990s changed everything. Through its long-standing partnership with Kirloskar Oil Engines, Cummins increased its stake in 1996-97, creating Cummins India Limited, a publicly listed subsidiary. This move unlocked local manufacturing scale, market trust, long-term investment freedom. At the same time, Cummins partnered with Tata Engineering and Locomotive Company in 1993, forming Tata Cummins Limited. The result? Cummins engines powered India's commercial vehicle boom. Beyond engines, becoming a power systems company. Throughout the 1990s, Cummins expanded aggressively. Power generation systems, filtration, fleet guard, engine components, advanced R&D. By the end of the decade, Cummins had fundamentally changed. It was no longer just an engine manufacturer. It was a global power systems and components leader. Engines were built locally in India, China, Japan, Europe. Export barriers fell. Local expertise rose. And Cummins embedded itself into regional industries worldwide. Chapter 4. The Test of a Century. Cummins in the 21st Age. By the time the world entered the 21st century, Cummins Inc. had already achieved what most companies never will: global reach, industry dominance, a trusted name in power. But history doesn't reward comfort. Because the new century brought a different kind of challenge, one that couldn't be solved with horsepower alone. The 2000s, reinvention under pressure. The early 2000s were unforgiving. Technology bubbles burst. Markets slowed. And environmental regulations tightened across the globe. Diesel engines, once symbols of progress, were now under scrutiny. At this critical moment, leadership changed. In 2000, Tim Soso became CEO and chairman. His mission was clear: make Cummins stronger, cleaner, and more disciplined without losing its core. Under Soso's leadership, Cummins embraced Six Sigma, operational excellence, and quality-driven manufacturing across its global plants. But the real battlefield was emissions. Governments demanded cleaner engines. Customers demanded compliance without sacrificing performance. Cummins responded with advanced emission control technologies, filtration systems, and cleaner combustion designs, proving once again that regulation didn't have to mean retreat. Even the 2008 global financial crisis couldn't stop the momentum. By the end of the decade, Cummins had evolved into a modern, emissions-compliant, globally diversified power company. The 2010s. Innovation becomes the identity. The 2010s marked a deeper transformation. In 2012, Tom Lineberger took over as CEO, bringing a renewed focus on innovation, sustainability, and long-term thinking. This decade redefined what Cummins stood for. Diesel was no longer the only answer. Cummins expanded aggressively into natural gas engines, hybrid systems, electrified powertrains. Advanced power generation, alternative fuel, sustainability was no longer a department. It became strategy. Meanwhile, Cummins strengthened partnerships across the globe, especially in India, Asia, Europe, and the Americas. By the end of the decade, its distributor and dealer network spanned nearly 190 countries, forming one of the most powerful industrial service networks on Earth. 2019, 100 years. Then came a moment few companies ever witnessed. On February 3, 2019, Cummins turned 100 years old. From a small workshop in Columbus, Indiana, to a global technology leader shaping the future of power. The centennial celebration, known worldwide as #Cummins100, was more than nostalgia. It was a statement, 100 years of survival, 100 years of reinvention, and the courage to face the next century head-on. But the hardest test was still ahead. The 2020s, Destination Zero. The 2020s arrived with urgency. Climate change, zero-emission mandates, a complete rethink of how the world generates power. Cummins responded with a bold vision called Destination Zero, a commitment to net zero emissions by 2050. And in 2023, the company made one of its most decisive moves ever. It launched Accelera by Cummins. Accelera unified Cummins' clean tech future under one banner. Battery electric systems, hydrogen fuel cells, e-axles, and traction systems, electrolyzers for green hydrogen. Backed by over $1.5 billion in investment, this wasn't an experiment. It was a declaration. Cummins wasn't abandoning its legacy. It was evolving it. Over more than a century, Cummins has faced every possible test: economic collapse, global wars, technological disruption, environmental pressure, and it survived not by resisting change, but by mastering it. This is a story of patience, of discipline, of perseverance measured not in quarters, but in decades. From diesel smoke to zero emissions. From a farm boy's obsession to a global power vision. Cummins reminds us of one enduring truth. Long-term success doesn't belong to the fastest. It belongs to those who endure, adapt, and evolve. And the journey is still far from over. Thank you for watching. See you in the next topic.